Truth is not a popularity contest. Truth is truth. And this idea that because one has many followers on social media, it must mean that they're actually speaking the truth is silly. I mean, if you think throughout history, how many people followed evil dictators, and they had a huge following. Hitler had many followers. Does that mean that he spoke the truth because he was incredibly popular?
The Nazi movement was the National Socialist movement. And the people who are now saying that they're Marxist or socialist or communist, are they not looking at history? Are they not seeing that socialism, Marxism, and communism has not worked to the favor of the population? We're living in a moment where truth feels negotiable, where facts are debated, narratives are weaponized, and reality itself seems to depend on who's telling the story. We used to turn to institutions, schools, media, leadership, for clarity. Although now many people don't trust those institutions at all. So where do they turn? They turn to content, to creators, to platforms, to voices that don't just report the world, but interpret it. And that raises bigger questions. Who is shaping how we think? Because today, education doesn't just happen in classrooms, it happens on screens, in short-form videos, in messages that are designed not just to inform, but to persuade. And whether we admit it or not, we are all being influenced. So the real question isn't whether influence exists, it's who's wielding it, and where education exists, begins, or ends, and where the persuasion begins, exists, or ends. Today's guest is someone who's not just participating in the space of educating and informing, but also participating in improving that space and helping define what that space actually is. As CEO of PragerU, Marissa Streit has built a platform that reaches millions, especially young people, with content centered on values, identity, and how to understand the world around them. Some people see it as education. Other people see it as advocacy. Many see it as both. So today, we're not just talking about media, we're talking about influence and about responsibility and about what happens when content becomes the classroom. I'm Yuval David, and this is Common Ground, where courage meets conversation and values light the way. So let's just begin the conversation.
Thanks for having me on, Yuval. I love that you started the conversation with the word courage, because I think it really, as we are experiencing what we're experiencing, and both on social media and media in general, even in our friend groups, I think we're realizing there's quite a bit of lack of courage. And the other thing that you mentioned is the word truth. Where do people get truth from? And whether truth is a subjective thing, or is there capital T truth? Does truth actually exist? You might remember over the past few years, people saying your truth, my truth. And I remember as a mom, as an educator, as a CEO, I would say, well, no, there is one truth. There isn't your truth and my truth. There is one truth. And so now that we're living this experience where there is no more common sense, that people are saying completely crazy things, and many young people are accepting that as reality, part of it is because we eroded the meaning of very, very significant words, like the word truth. There is only one truth. There isn't your truth and my truth. There is one truth, one reality.
I very much agree. Facts are facts. Statistics are statistics. When something happens, it happens. Yes, there can be different perspective to why it happened, how to define it, how to describe it. But when something happens, it happens. And that's something that's so important for us to focus on. Yes, with the word truth, and not to conflate truth and facts with narrative, with the different way that people try to spin it. And that's something that's very dangerous now. And in fact, it's one of the things that has very much impacted my own political process, my own political journey as a former Democrat, former progressive, former woke person, where my values never changed, but my political affiliations changed. And I found myself in this moderate centrist perspective to be able to look at what different people, organizations, and movements are saying. So unpackaging truth is so imperative, and also focusing on values. What are the values that we find important? For example, I many times have to argue about which governments or countries or even media outlets I support internationally. And I say, well, do they support women's rights? Do they support freedom of religion? Do they support democracy? Do they support the ability to run for office? Do they support the ability to protest? Do they protect freedom of speech? Do they provide health care for all? And then I ultimately learned that I could also just say, do they support women's rights? Because all of those other things tend to come with countries that support women's rights. The countries, the groups, and the organizations that don't support women's rights generally don't also support freedom of religion, equal access to health care. I could go through that whole list again. So in this era, we're very much affected by Islamist movements that are impacting our lives here, even here in the United States. We're impacted by political movements that are spinning, going back to the word truth, what truth means, and trying to shift the narrative. You combat the ever-shifting spin by focusing on facts. What would you say is your major approach to doing that you also aim to inspire others to engage?
People don't understand that much of what we're experiencing today is not necessarily new. It's just come to a point where nobody can ignore it anymore because it has gone so big. So when you talk about the Red-Green Alliance, how these Islamists have been migrating and bringing in their ideas that are frankly in conflict with Judeo-Christian values, in conflict with the West. How has that happened? Well, what has happened is the Marxists, this idea of populist Marxism, got blended with Islam. And when they blend, this actually started in Egypt, but at this point it's all over the world, where they're pushing this narrative of oppressor versus oppressed. If one is successful, then they must be horrible and they must be mean. This is a Marxist ideology, but they infuse it with religion because people have an affinity in the Middle East towards Islam. And so as you say, Islamism, it's taking Islam and Marxism and combining it together by selling you this idea that you are a victim, that you should hate everything, that you should destroy everything in order for somebody new to come in and fix things for you. Now you move to the West, you're seeing much of it happening in America. Over the past few years, you've seen it predominantly on the left, where you say that you are a political refugee of the left, right? And I'm sure that at many points you felt like politically homeless. Maybe many of our listeners here feel politically homeless even today. Well, what has happened here in the West? This idea that you're sold that you're a victim, like Black Lives Matter, or because you're of a certain gender, right? Okay, I'm a woman, I must be a victim, right? They sell you this victimhood mentality, and they infuse that with politics in order to break you and to break everything around you and essentially conquer your emotions so that you go and vote for them. Now you're seeing this mirror image on the right, right? When people try to understand what is happening here with the woke right. The woke right is selling that same black pill, the black pill that we originally saw in Egypt, right? Where the Islamists took Marxism and Islamism and turned it into this ball of negativity, of populism.
And you're talking about during the Arab Spring, for
During the
example?
Arab Spring. So you take it's the same exact playbook. What you saw in the Middle East has migrated first to the West within the realm of the left. And they basically took a bat to everything, right? You don't believe anybody, destroy the rich, eat the rich, destroy everything, nothing goes. There's no difference between male and female, but just destroy everything. We will come in and fix everything for you. And the way to do that is to sell people the black pill, to say you are a victim. And so if you have a certain sexuality, you're a victim. If you're a female, you're a victim. If you are of a certain color, you're a victim. If you have a certain different last name, you're a victim, right? E pluribus unum, the American concept of from many one is an inoculation against the melting pot. It's an inoculation against splitting us apart and labeling ourselves as a victim. But the Marxists know that if they can break e pluribus unum, If they can chop us up into different desperate groups of people, we will turn against each other and we will identify as a victim because we will try to blame the other group for our hardship. Now, what you saw on the left, which you ran away from, now you're starting to see also employed and deployed on the right.
Right, which is one of the very dangerous things that's so important for us to speak about, since and I don't know if I actually ran away from the left. I feel like I was standing on a football field. Now, I'm about to give a football reference, even though I'm a skier and into adventure sports. So to all the fans out there who like football, I'm sorry. I don't even watch the Super Bowl halftime show. I'm all about skiing and speed. But I'm going to give you this football reference. I feel like I was standing on a field and the entire field shifted. So I used to be in the left because I believed in e pluribus unum. I believed that our diversity was what made our oneness special. And then I
Mhm.
realized that the focus on diversity started to split people apart instead of bringing them together, and how dangerous that was. And even throughout my work within LGBT advocacy, when I was still part of LGBTQIA2S plus movements, and I kept seeing these letters being added and these different elements to the movement being added when it shifted away from what it really was about our rights to be part of society like everybody else, to just be normal Americans and not to be queer, not to be different. And then I saw people trying to say, well, we are bigger victims. We are queer. We are different. We are unicorns. And I was like, well, if we're saying that we're unicorns and we're special, then that means that we also need to say that everybody else are unicorns and everybody else is special as well. If we're going to wave our pride flag, then we also should wave pride flags of every other movement, of the women's movement, of the Native American movement, of Black movements, of Jewish movements, of Muslim movements. I mean, we're going to have flags all over the place. Or are we saying that e pluribus unum, that what brings us together is the American flag, that I no longer always have to be referenced as a gay American or as a Jewish American or as an Israeli American, but just as an American? And the same goes for Black Americans and Native Americans and women Americans. And we could go through all of it, where something that we're able to do here in America is move beyond the victimhood and move into resilience, determination, the things that defined our country. Even when you look at the different narratives of different peoples who struggled and went through hardships in this country, eventually they were able to flourish. So we need to go back to highlighting and amplifying the people who do well and aim to do well for others. That is the America that I fight for as an American activist.
Isn't it ironic that the more letters they add to their names, the more they divide us? They do so in the name of inclusivity, but actually they exclude more people by adding more flags and more letters to their names, where really, if we're all united under red, white, and blue, the American flag, that is the most inclusive thing one could do. What I love about being an American is that in America, unlike most places around the world, I'm not the American Jew. I'm not the Jew. I'm the American. And for a very long time growing up in America, that was the case. Except now, when you see these Marxists coming in, trying to divide us, trying to add more letters, trying to add additional flags, suddenly we will end up finding ourselves chopped up and alone. And rather than living together in a melting pot, we will find ourselves in a chopped up fruit salad where we can't get along, where we're no longer united under red, white, and blue, but we are nothingness. And that is really what our adversaries are aiming towards.
They're aiming to divide us. And I oftentimes say that not only are they aiming to divide us, they recognize that it's too hard to defeat America from a military standpoint, because
Hmm.
the US military is the strongest in the world. It's massive, but they can create a rot from within. And that's the danger of social media, where people are following certain people just because they might have 1 million or 2 million or 5 million or even 100,000 or 10,000 followers or less sometimes. That if they follow this person and they just listen to what the algorithm is and what seems to be a popular hashtag, then it must be true. So these foreign movements and some movements within the United States that are aiming to break things apart are manipulating the minds and creating a rot from within.
Yeah.
That is the war of information.
Truth is not a popularity contest. Truth is truth. And this idea that because one has many followers on social media, it must mean that they're actually speaking the truth is silly. I mean, if you think throughout history, how many people were followed by evil dictators, and they had a huge following. I mean, Hitler had many followers. Does that mean that he spoke the truth because he was incredibly popular?
Well, and people
No.
always forget the Nazi movement was the National Socialist movement. And the people who are now saying that they're Marxist or socialist or communist, somehow, and I don't understand, are they not looking at history? Are they not seeing that socialism, Marxism, and communism has not worked to the favor of the population in any other time that it was tried any other place around the world? Are they not focusing on that?
Well, you bring up history. There's something very interesting that happened after Nazi Germany was taken down by the Allies. Should I remind everybody that the United States had to get involved for those who feel very strongly about isolationism. But after Nazi Germany fell, the socialists no longer wanted to label themselves associated with the Nazi Socialist uh, Party, right? And so they started saying that the Nazis were fascists, and they started dropping the socialist name out of there. And this was something that was actually inculcated into American history books when kids were taught about socialism and history and Nazi Germany, et cetera. And I'd like to remind everybody that if you actually study the Nazi platform, it is completely in line with socialism. It's entirely big government. They do not believe in capitalism. They do not believe in free market. They do not believe in the basic values that conservatives believe in, God included. They rejected God. They said it's all about science, right? Science is the new God. And so ironically, people who associate Nazi Germany with anything on the right, they're falling into the psyop, the original psyop that was infused into our academics earlier on in the years after Nazi Germany was taken down.
Right. And psyops being psychological operations, how to manipulate the psyche of a population is to manipulate the psyche of individuals. And to manipulate the psyche of individuals is to manipulate the psyche of a community. So if you can redefine what a community's needs, wants, and challenges are, people who identify with that community or who are part of that community will say, oh, I'm part of this community, then I must believe these things. And we're a country that focused on the rugged individualism, on the successes that an individual can have. You know what? Going back to that football and adventure sports reference, I love the Olympics. I love adventure sports because I have to do the work to get to the top of the mountain, to ski down, to bypass the challenges, to keep improving my form. And when I see individual athletes doing amazing things, that's inspiring for me. And when we're able to focus on those individual athletes, even when they're part of a team, that is what is amazing. They're not only part of a team, they're also an individual. They become a better team player because they are constantly trying to become better individuals. Marxism, socialism, and communism are trying to erase the individualism and only focus on the community. Just because I'm Jewish doesn't mean I agree and I'm exactly the same as every other Jew. Just because I'm American doesn't mean I agree and I'm exactly the same as every other American. Just because I'm gay doesn't mean I agree and I'm exactly the same as everybody who's part of the LGBTQIA2S plus movement. In fact, I'm not, and that individuality makes me a better team player. That is what I find so exciting about being an American and what I hope American can become again, as long as we don't lose the narrative and the understanding of truth to the far left and the far right, which in that horseshoe theory are meeting and speaking a very similar language.
Well, I think that ultimately America is no longer divided between left and right. I think America is now divided between those who want to identify as victims and those who are willing to be self-reliant and resilient. Self-reliance and resilience is in the American DNA, and victimhood is in the Marxist DNA. And the reason you are seeing Marxists who are both on the left or on the right is because they both have one thing in common: blame, conspiracy, and despair. that they have more in common. The extreme left and the extreme right have more in common than they have ever had in the past. And the reason is because the Marxists have gotten to them. The Marxists have gotten to the youth, both on the left and onto the right, into the right. And they have sold to them this idea of the black pill. They have been sold this idea that they have been lied to, that they have been robbed, that they don't have economic opportunity, that they're not going to be able to date and get married and have children, that everything is set out against them. Both the left and the right have been sold and now believe these ideas because in our schools and on social media, but specifically in our schools, we have inculcated this idea of the oppressor versus the oppressed, of this victim mentality. And so young people have been ripe for a black pill. Whether they're on the left or on the right, they have been ripened to believe that they are a victim. And
Right.
that's exactly why you're seeing this horseshoe situation. Now, I am hoping that the vast majority of people, they don't live on social media all the time. Now, I know both you and I rely on social media in order to get to people, but
We do, although
hopefully
I've been putting my phone down a lot
it's
more
a good thing because people need fresh air. I keep saying, go on a date with someone, take somebody out, go do some manual labor. How much time do you even spend getting some fresh air? But if you're spending time on social media, you think that the world is collapsing. You think that America is collapsing. You're sold this idea that our economy is not doing well, that the unemployment rates are terrible, that America is losing. It's a flat out lie, Yuval. Our unemployment rate is lower than ever before in America, at least in the past few years. Our economy is doing very well. Our borders are completely secure in a way that, you know, illegal immigrants are barely making it into our country. How are you not happy? Why are you swallowing the black pill?
right.
America is playing on a world stage in a way that we haven't seen. We've been praying for so many years. We're no longer that fat, chunky rabbit that's sitting there in the middle of the field waiting to be eaten. And so if you go on X or on social media, you're being told that we're losing, but we're actually winning.
And I think that's something that's so important because I I have my own, PTSD. In fact, I don't call it a disorder, it's just order, it's part of life. And in fact, based on the things that I went through, but also experiencing what others have gone through, it's not even a post-traumatic stress, it's a current traumatic stress. But I don't stop, and I'm not stopped by it. I refuse to stop myself and just say, this is a trauma. I will not move forward. And when I speak at these different conferences about PTSD and about traumas and about victimhood, it's not about trauma and victimhood. It's about resilience. It's about determination. It's about survival. And when we encounter people, even in the communities that see victims, when you see somebody who's still marching and still doing something and still creating and still working and still building themselves, we say, oh, you're so brave. So why don't we lean towards that and say, yes, you are brave, you are resilient, you are moving forward. And we've learned the people who've suffered the greatest victimization, they're still alive. And because I encounter them and am part of them, we don't say, I'm only a victim. Don't only look at me based on what happened to me. Look at me based on who I am and how I engage and keep moving forward. That is what is the most exciting. In fact, this morning I was having coffee and there was a disabled couple that came in to get their coffee, and two different people uh, off got up from their chairs and said, would you like to sit here? And I let them do it, and I could tell that this disabled couple, they didn't need anybody's help. They were just going to grab a cup of coffee. They entered the coffee shop on their own. They were able to order the coffee on their own. They were able to pick up the coffee on their own. They didn't need anybody to pity them. They were just coffee drinkers. We need to recognize that people are moving forward and not look in a condescending manner. And that is what the hero complex is about. That's what the Marxist movement is trying to say. This is a heroic movement that's going to save you. Don't worry about doing it yourself. We will do it for you. It's the same thing that we used to criticize mansplaining and white-splaining. And now we have the era of the white liberal American woman who thinks that she's doing doing all these greater things for people without actually recognizing that she's infantilizing those she aims to help. Don't infantilize the people you claim to be helping. Help them the way that they're helping themselves and just join the team and recognize that they're individuals.
The antidote to misery is to not identify as a victim, but as a victor. The Marxists know this, and Americans know this. And we're all faced now with a choice. You can choose to find the hardship that you've experienced and allow it to take you down, or you can choose to find the hardship that you experienced and look at it as a callus that makes you stronger. Every successful person I know has gone through really hard things.
Right.
And when they went through hard things and they walked through the fire, they ended up being stronger and more resilient and more capable. It is the story of the American dream. It is the story of most successful entrepreneurs, and should be the story of anybody that is listening to this. You have a choice. You have a choice to not identify as a victim. Because you're gay, it doesn't mean that you need to identify as a victim. Because you're a female, it does not mean that you need to identify as a victim. Because you have a certain color, or because your parents came from somewhere, it doesn't mean that you should identify as a victim. We must stop celebrating victim bingo. The left started by celebrating victim bingo in classrooms. It was a horrible thing. I saw this in classrooms, pushing kids to identify as a victim so they can win victim bingo, so they can get more attention, so they can speak first, so they can be the first on stage when the class would put on a play. None of this should happen. And now we are seeing this on the right, this push for victim bingo. Again,
I think it also this victim bingo comes from a place of, gosh, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm unpackaging it right now in real time. Is it from a place of people recognizing that they're not as successful as they want to be? Whatever success means to them. It doesn't only mean financial success. It means just having goals and being able to meet them or not. So when they're not able to reach their goals, is it easier to say, oh, it's because someone else has victimized me? Or maybe I need to pivot and try to do better. I'm going to go back to the skiing reference because I am an avid skier. Double black diamonds, as fast as possible, as high as possible. When I ski, I don't only say, oh, there's a rock, there's a tree, there's a cliff. I see, there's the path forward, there's the path forward, there's the path forward. And if the rock or the tree is going to be so prominently in my way that it causes me to stop because I don't want to fall and I don't want to get hurt, and I stop, I compose myself, I refocus, I lean forward, and I keep going with that process. That rock, the tree, or the cliff is not going to stop me, but it will help me recognize where my path forward needs to be, because I don't control my entire path forward all the time. I don't know what's ahead all the time. It's whether some people want to say it's predetermined, someone else chose it. Well, you know what? It's the path, and it's the path I'm on, or it's the mountain I'm on, so I can make my own journey forward. That is something that we need to focus on more often.
so the reason being a victim is so attractive, as I say, people love engaging in the victim bingo game, and the Marxists know that it's an easy sell and it's a great way to get a population to get involved, is because the bad emotions, they come for free. The hard emotions, the ones that are good for you, you have to work hard for. Those are the ones that God will put in front of you only if you put in the work. The devil will give you the bad emotions for free. Now, it's always easier to blame somebody else. It is always easier to say, well, it's not my fault that I didn't wake up earlier in the morning and ski harder and take more risks and practiced more. It's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault that they didn't set up the skis for me in a way that I can buy it for cheaper, right? Or whatever reason it is that people can blame another person, right? Those are the blame is a free emotion. It's a negative emotion. The hard work that comes with the emotion of success, right? And pride and pride in your own work, those things you have to actually go against human nature. It's not in human nature to work that hard. It is in human nature to blame somebody else. And so the reason victim bingo is so easy for politicians to push is because they know that's already in you. It's
Right.
in you as a human being, right? What is not in you as a human being that needs to be inculcated and taught. And this is part of why America is so special, because in the American DNA, in the founders' DNA, and their vision for America was this vision of self-reliance and hard work, right? It was the fact that you're willing to even die for liberty. You're not going to ask for stuff for free because you're willing to work hard for it. That is an antidote to human nature, which, by the way, Yuval, is based on teachings from the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible is an antidote, an explanation of human nature. The founders were so inspired by the Hebrew Bible, they said, we're gonna do things differently. We are not gonna sell this bill of goods that if you rely on a big government, you're gonna be taken care of. We're gonna sell the bill of goods that if you work hard and you don't blame others, but you actually put your hardest work into this country, you will have the greatest country ever. But the moment you are sold that a big government's going to come take care of you, that you're going to be able to do less work, you're going to be able to blame other people, is the moment you lose the great American experiment. And that is exactly why victim bingo is so dangerous for America. It is against American values.
Well, here's the thing. It's not just dangerous for America, it's dangerous for people. It's dangerous for individuality. We have all of these expressions that you'd think would remind us of how we're supposed to proceed. Even let me go to somewhere very simplistic. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink, right? If you want to drink the water, you need to drink the water yourself. Yes, somebody can guide you there, but you still need to do the action. Or leaning back towards Jewish thought and Jewish principles, which you were just speaking about. We have the very famous Hillel quote, Im ein ani li mili, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Ukshani latzmi ma ani, and if I'm only for myself, what am I? Ve'im lo achshav ematai, and if not now, when? So that means I cannot only be for myself, I must also be for others. If I'm going to help myself, I must also help others at the same time. And it says, expounds, I cannot only be for others, because if I'm only for others, then what am I? I lose myself amongst that. That is part of what we're talking about when the individual is lost within the community or within the movement. And then it says, Im lo achshav ematai, if not now, then when? It's about taking action now. My grandparents, who were Holocaust survivors and recognized heroes of World War II, that they miraculously and heroically survived and continued to fight not just for their own lives, but for the lives of other people, whether they were their family, their friends, or community members. One of the things that my grandparents would always say is that it's one of the best things to do in life is to plant a tree under which's shade you will never sit. You do the effort. You see the tree grow from a seed into a sapling, into an actual tree, and you know that somebody else is going to benefit from it. It's doing something for the greater good of society, but actually doing the work yourself. And I feel that in America right now, we need another speech of the ask not speech. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. And if the people who are feeling that they're not able to achieve their goals, or are feeling like they're victims, or telling themselves that they're losers and not doing well and doing all of that self-deprecating, cutting yourself down, remember that there's more you can do. There are more paths you can take. And guess what? Challenge is part of life. Life isn't only, it's triggering and now I must stop all people from having this conversation that's triggering me. Well, I turn the term triggering into activating. I'm affected by what you're saying. You are not offensive, but what you did offended me. I'm offended by that, and now I can talk about it and how I move forward because I have my perspective. So it's about what we can do to continue to move forward. So I want to get towards one of the things that you're doing with Prager in PragerU in terms of sharing this and using the impact of social media and edutainment, I guess we can call it, educational entertainment content.
So much of what you referenced reminds me of a very, very important story that inspired the founders when they first came here to America before it became the United States. They were inspired by the story of the Israelites leaving Egypt. They were so inspired by this that they actually designed their original seal of Moses. The original American seal was Moses crossing the desert. And the reason the story is so important, Yuval, as we talk about this victimhood mentality, this blackpilling mentality, they identified themselves as if they were Moses crossing the desert. There is a story within the Hebrew Bible where the Israelites cried to Moses and said, "We want to go back to Egypt. We want to go back to Egypt because in Egypt we had free meat when we were working for the big government." They wanted the free stuff. They didn't want the hardship. They didn't want to work hard. And so they wanted to turn around and go back to Egypt and be slaves again and forfeit the opportunity of freedom because they weren't willing to put in the work. And then, of course, they got punished. And they were reminded that in order to have freedom, freedom isn't free. And they were going to have to forego in the short term the hardship of not having meat so that in the long term, they could make it to the land of Israel. This inspired the American founders to create the American seal, where they depicted Moses not necessarily crossing the Sea of Reeds, but actually there in the desert, because they knew, the founders knew, that in order to have freedom and self-reliance, you're going to have to work hard, and it's not going to always be pleasant. And you're going to have these moments that you're going to want to do a U-turn, and you want to go back to the big government, and you're going to want somebody who's going to take care of you and make you feel like you're safe and free and you have your safe space. But ultimately, you will pay a heavy price. You will pay a price of eternal slavery if you don't have enough courage to put in the work and to be self-reliant and resilient. And that's why I say to you and to everybody that is listening, the most important thing we teach at PragerU is refuse the black pill. Choose self-reliance. Choose resilience. Choose to be like the American founders, who were not perfect and certainly have had their blemishes, but they understood one important thing. They understood human nature. They understood that freedom isn't free. And if you want to keep living in a free country, you're going to have to wake up every day and you're going to have to ask yourself, how can I contribute? How can I contribute to this country so that I have a future that is not looking like much of the Middle East today? And we are under attack, as you said, from within. We are not going to be attacked through bullets and tanks, but we are attacked from within, whether social media or education. So I leave you with this proposition. What are you going to do about it so that when in 20 years from now you look back, you can say to yourself that it didn't sit back and allow the greatest country on God's green earth to get destroyed? What are you able to do to wake up tomorrow morning and reject the black pill and be part of the solution?
And that's a massive note to end this conversation, which of course we continue. And I encourage everybody to continue that same conversation and to unpackage those same thoughts. Who is a vetted source? Where should I receive information from? Who can I trust to not only lead, but co-lead, or help me help myself, or help me help them? It's about our individuality and the actions that we take. So because we're in this era, this information era, where it seems like massive oceans of information, just because there's a lot of information out there doesn't mean that all of that information is true. We need to understand where we get our information, how we are educated, who is educating us, how we aim to educate others, and to keep bettering ourselves. What we're witnessing right now isn't just a shift in media. It's a shift in authority. For generations, institutions told us what mattered, what was true, what to believe. Today, that authority is fractured, and in its place, new educators have emerged, not in classrooms, but on platforms, not through curriculum, but through content. And sometimes that content informs, sometimes it persuades, and sometimes it does both. But here's the reality. We don't just consume information anymore. We are shaped by it. Every video, every message, every narrative. And when education and influence begin to overlap, discernment becomes our responsibility. Not just to ask what we are hearing, but to ask, why are we hearing it? Not just to choose sides, but to understand the systems shaping those sides. Because if we lose the ability to think critically, it won't really matter who controls the narrative. We'll already be controlled by it. That's what this show, Common Ground, is all about. It's not about agreement, it's about clarity. It's not about slogans, it's about substance. It's not about reaction, but understanding. Because the future doesn't just depend on what we believe, it depends on how we learn to think. I'm Yuval David, and this is Common Ground. And for today's episode, I was joined by the brilliant, the bold, the beautiful Marissa. What an absolute honor to have you in this conversation today.
Thank you. It's a great honor. And if we earn your trust, I welcome you to our platform. I'll tell you that you're not going to agree on everything, which you shouldn't. But my hope is that we can expand your intellectual horizons. And nobody should tell you that they should be the primary source of your news. I won't say that either. Nobody should tell you that they should be the primary source of education. You're going to have to put in the work. That's part of what it means to be a discerning person. But I hope to earn your trust, and I hope to be able to serve you in whatever way possible so that you can live a happier, more prosperous life.
Thank you, Marissa. And tune in to Common Ground on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and everywhere you can find it. And also, in addition to following Common Ground, following Marissa Streit, following me, Yuval David, also follow PragerU. Be challenged by it, whether you agree with it or not.